Welcome, everyone. My name is Susan Patterson, and I'm the host for this YouTube channel, and I am so pleased to have Marlene with us here today. Marlene is a leader for Pearls, a ministry that serves women in the commercial sex industry, specifically strip clubs. Many of these women become sex trafficking victims. Marlene gave her life to Jesus at 12 years old and has served God in multiple ministries over the years. She began as a student leader, planning chapels and teaching the word at her middle and high school. In her youth, she also went on mission trips and worked as a youth leader with middle school girls. Marlene went on to become a credentialed school teacher and get her Bible study degree. Over the years, she has enjoyed leading various Bible study groups at church and at work. In 2013, God called her to join the Pearls ministry from its beginning, and since then, she has become Pearl's leader in 2015. Welcome, Marlene.
Thank you so much, Susan, for having me. It's a true joy and honor.
Yes, and I'm excited about what you have to share with our audience today.
Me too.
Well, thank you. So how did you know God was calling you to serve women in strip clubs?
So I don't have a background of being in the sex industry, and a lot of people would, if they looked at my story, they would be like, how did you wind up here? So I was raised in a Christian bubble. I had the Christian home. My parents were married all through growing up, and I had a Christian school I went to. I was very involved in my Christian school and very involved in my Christian church. And so I don't have the background that would say, oh, I think God's calling you into the, ministry, and especially to lead one, especially. So for me, my Christian bubble, it got popped when I graduated high school. And I went to University of Redlands, and I was like, the whole world opened up to what the real world is like outside of the Christian bubble. And but I was still pretty naive, even in my first marriage. When I got married, like a year into my marriage, I actually applied for a stripper job, doing a phone interview, not knowing I was applying for a stripper job. I thought it just said dancing in the newspaper with all these dollar bill signs, and I was like, oh hey, I'm still a college student, I need some money and I can learn to dance. And then in the phone interview, as they were asking me questions, I was like, oh, that's what this job is for. I was so embarrassed because of my naivety. And so how does God take a 21-year-old with that naivety in the church and in the next decade prepare her for leading a sex ministry? For me, it was my first marriage that was very difficult, and being married to an addict, and the struggles you go through with loving an addict, and being long-suffering, and really having God's heart. Because when you're married to an addict, if you're going to do it God's way, you're going to have God's heart in developing that. And so with those addictions, it really prepared me to understand the difficulties of getting out of addictions. And it also prepared my heart for it. But when I was, I don't know if I was 30 or 31, but I was doing this like women's networking group. And in that networking group, I was sitting there and I just heard the Holy Spirit say to me, do you see that woman over there? Go befriend her. And I was like, okay. And so I go and sat there, and I had no idea that that friendship would totally change my life.
Wow.
And that woman, her name was Sonia, and we hit it off, became best friends within a matter of weeks. And it was a short time into that she was like, Marlene, I don't feel like I've been completely honest with you. And I was like, well, I could see like whatever she was having a hard time sharing, like I wanted to help her just get it out. And so I'm like, okay, well, she's this beautiful woman of God. And I'm like, what's the worst about her past? So I was like, well, what was it, girl? Were you like a prostitute or something? And she's like, well, yeah, I was.
Oh, wow.
And I felt, putting my foot in my mouth. And she just began to share her story with me of how she got into the industry, what she went through when she was in it, and then how God brought her out. And it completely opened my eyes to what women go through, and often their stories, because there's a lot of similarities, as we know, about what brings women into the sex industry. And it's broken things.
Yes.
You know, broken homes and broken relationships or toxic relationships and needing money and being vulnerable. And women don't grow up like, oh, when I grow up, I want to be a stripper.
Yes, exactly.
So there's something that happens to you along the way that makes you feel like you don't have a choice, or you truly are a victim of human trafficking.
Yes.
So, and then we had a heart. It was her vision, Sonia's vision. She wanted to help other women. And so she's the one who started Pearls. We went down to Treasures Ministry in LA, and we got trained there on how to do strip club ministry. And then I came across the book that Treasures has out that's called the Stiletto Project. And it's just full of women's testimonies of how they got in, what they experienced when they were in, and how God got them out. And that book just sealed it in my heart.
Wow.
Where I just felt so much love for these women and compassion, and to go out and be a light for these women and where most people are not going. So that's how my story of how God brought me into it. And if you would have told me that at 21 years old, I would have been like, yeah, I don't. If somebody would have given me a word of prophecy at 21 years old, hey, someday you're going to lead a sex ministry, I'd be like, yeah, no, I don't think so.
Not you. Right. Yes, it's amazing how God works.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
So if God can speak through a donkey, he can speak through anybody.
I love it. So how are these women being exploited?
So a lot of people think because they're, all the women choose to be there in the strip club, they don't see them as victims. And honestly, a lot of the women who work in the clubs, they don't see themselves as victims either. But a lot of sex trafficking victims don't know they're victims until oftentimes they get out. So especially if all they do is the strip club, they can often think, well, I'm not having sex, although sex does happen in strip clubs, or outside of it is like an extension of what's going on in the clubs. And there are women trafficked inside the clubs. And sometimes they're trafficked by their boyfriends, their husbands even. I talk to women all the time where after they've came to Christ and they've come out of it, they didn't realize their own boyfriend or their husband was their pimp, because they would have never done what they done if it wasn't for that influence in their life, telling them, hey, you should go do this and you should go make money. And
someone they trusted.
Exactly.
Right.
So, and then other women, even if they are choosing to be in the club, you have to ask, why are they choosing to be in the club?
Yes.
There's circumstances in their life where they feel like that's their only option, or it's their best option. And so exposing yourself to different women's stories, it helps you understand that. And also when you look at, you have the strip club owners and the bouncers and even the DJs, in a way, I don't tell them this because I love them and I show respect to them when we go in the clubs, but in a way they're a pimp too, because they are taking money from the women. The women at the end of their shifts, or I don't know, payroll, however it works, but they pay the club, they pay the bouncer, and they pay the DJ money that they exploited themselves.
Yes.
And we think also that this is just a man problem, but I can't tell you how many times I go in the club and it's women in the club. And it's not just women coming in with their boyfriend or their husbands. It's sisters, like, hey, let's go hang out at the strip club. And they feel like they are supporting the women by giving them money. But in reality, those women are exploiting other women too. But because we have such a hyper-sexualized culture, they often don't see it that way. And they don't understand what that woman's going through, because they're there to put a facade on. They're there to create the illusion and the fantasy inside the club. But you don't know what's going on behind that mask, and who they really are and their struggles that they're going through because of what they're doing.
Yes, it's very sad. Some of these stories are really sad.
Yeah, and it's true. Also with the strip clubs, a lot of times it is for traffickers, they are intentionally taking them to the clubs to groom them for taking them out on the streets or escort services. Yes. It's like if they can get them comfortable with just dancing provocatively, then they think I can get them, they're already down that road of being provocative so that they will go further into the sex industry.
Right. Now, how does Pearls serve these women?
So we go into the Inland Empire strip clubs, and there was 5 when we started. Now there's 4 of them. There's usually about 90 gifts that we present and we bring to the clubs. And in those gifts, we have little things like whether it be makeup or jewelry, something that they will hopefully enjoy and not be offended, because it's different than ministering to women on the streets where they have different needs.
Yes.
So if you were to bring those same types of gifts to them, they'd be probably offended.
Yes. Yes.
Like, what do you think? I don't need this.
Right. It's like socks to someone in the strip club. Right.
Right.
Go ahead.
But the heart of our gift, the gift is just to like give a physical thing to let them know that we love them. But the heart of our gift is the outreach note we put in there. And we always put in a message, whether it be a story of a woman who used to be in the club, or it's just something that God's put on our hearts to share with them. And we just want to go in and let these women know that we love them and that we're there for them. We consider ourselves their support group. And we let them know how they can contact us and get in touch with us. And we will befriend them. However, some of them, they just want to be friends with you on social media. And that's all they're comfortable with, and that's fine. It still gives us opportunities to pray for them and to see what's going on in their life a little bit. And then some of them, we actually do develop real life friendships with them. And we can go on their journey. If they're wanting to get out of the club, we go along that journey, whether that be a quick journey or a journey that takes years for them to get out. We have resources where we point them to other ministries that help in ways that we can't, because we are a small ministry. So, yeah.
That's fabulous. Now, could you just share with us like one or two stories of the difference your ministry has made? Like, you know, how a woman was before you met her and how she's doing now?
Yeah, I would say the few women that have actually reached out to us and wanted relationships with us, they're just so excited that there's actually Christians out there that want to love them where they're at. That's like, what, you know what I do and you're not judging me?
Yes.
It's powerful. And just as, you know, and I love sharing my story in particular about coming in as a church girl, because you don't have to have been in the sex industry to reach out to these women. I think it's a beautiful blend when a ministry has both. You need the women who've been in the industry to come in and share, because it shows them, wow, if God could get them out of this situation, then maybe God can get me out of this situation too. They need that hope, and they need somebody who truly understands the ins and outs of what they've been through. But then somebody like me comes in and it's like, I've never been in the sex industry. And like, yeah, I'm not perfect. I've had sexual sin in my life, you know, but overall, like, I've honored God with my life in this area, and yet I can still come in here and love you. I believe God, this is what God showed me, because I was like, God, why are you calling me?
Yes.
I don't feel qualified by experience.
Yes.
And the Lord just showed me, he's like, these women need to see that you can't relate with what they've been through at that level. In different ways I can, on a different level.
Right. But you haven't lived their experience.
Right. Like, I've experienced rejection. I've experienced being used by men. I have experienced a lot of things they have, just in a different, you know, what would be considered a more normal way.
Yes.
That most people experience. But God said they will have a better way of understanding that I really love them where they're at. Because they're going to look at you and just be like, oh, you're this goody two-shoes.
Yes.
And they're like, but if she can love me where I'm at and she knows what I'm doing, maybe God can love me where I'm at right now.
Yes.
And that's powerful. They need to believe that God is a safe place for them to come to, right where they are in any brokenness and hurting and in pain. And so you got to have both people coming alongside. It serves different purposes.
Yes. Yes. That was so well said and very inspiring. That too many people, when they feel they've fallen from grace, they don't feel that God's going to accept them. Right. And when you come in and model loving them and accepting where they're at, it definitely gives them faith that if you can do it and you're a mere human.
Exactly. And here's God who's perfect.
Right. What can God understands their story. God understands what happened.
Right.
That is so beautiful, how you're restoring people to the love of Jesus Christ. I mean, so inspiring, Marlene. Thank you so much for sharing all that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's what an honor it is to have God's heart and to be able to share it with others. We're the ones that are blessed. Right,
exactly. And actually, I'd like you to share about that. Because I know very often people think about how they want to minister to people and serve other people, but and the difference that we've made, but we don't always share the difference it made in our life to say yes to God. And you said yes to God. So would you like to share a little bit about the difference it has made in your life?
Yes. I wasn't prepared for that one. You threw me a curveball. Honestly, I feel like being in this ministry has been an outpouring of what God's put in me. You know, we all go through different things in our life, and I have my own stories of the pain I've been through, and it gives purpose to those things. And so it's no different than the woman who's come out of the industry and being able to minister to others and help others in the same situation, how it gives a purpose to their pain. It brings God's glory from something that was so terrible that happened. And I feel like it's no different for me, you know, even though I wasn't in the industry.
Yes. For me personally, I mean, I started out obviously, you know, wanting human trafficking to end. Is that by saying yes to God, God has given me a passion that is so enlivening. I have so much energy. Right. Everyone thinks I'm much younger than I am. I mean, I'm going to be 70 in like 6 months. And the other thing that's really raised my faith is to watch in action how God restores people. I mean, my faith is so much deeper than it's ever been. And God is true. Yes, and God has given me the grace to deal with the brutality of it. A lot of people I know want to run away from human trafficking, even though they feel called by God, because it's so brutal. The stories are so heartbreaking. Yes, and so, I mean, heart-wrenching. Right. That, you know, they just are afraid they're going to be depressed all the time if they say yes to God in this type of ministry. But it's not like that. I mean, everyone I know is like happy and energized and faith-filled.
Because we're the light of the world.
Yes, yes.
If we're not doing it, who's going to?
Yes.
And nobody's better equipped than us.
Yes, but God equipped us to be the light of the world. I mean, left to my own devices, I'm a cranky old woman. I mean... But with this, I'm not like that at all. I mean, God, because it is our job to bring joy. It is our job to bring love. And God fills us with that so that we can serve the people he wants us to serve.
It's so true, because when I walk into the strip club, yes, I'm aware of the oppression and the darkness that's in there. And I'm aware of any danger in our surroundings. But honestly, when I go into the club, I just feel God's love. I feel God's light. And that's what I always get this picture of, like, when we're walking into the club, we're bringing God's light into the darkness. That's such an honor to do that it's not just, you know, Jesus tells us that we are to be the light of the world, and we're to not hide that light. We are to shine it. You can't really show it too much when you're already in the light. It shines the brightest when it's in the darkest places.
Yes.
And the sex industry, it doesn't get much darker than that.
No.
That's about as dark as it gets. No. Because the enemy loves to keep sexual sin hidden and in the dark.
Yes.
And we're all about, nope, we're going to expose it, but we're exposing it with God's love and with God's truth so that it can be healed. It has to be exposed so that God can heal it.
Yes, and in this industry, as we know, the evil one can dress it up so people think they're going to get what they want, which is entertainment or whatever it is they're looking for, when really what people want is intimacy.
True.
And in the commercial sex industry, it's the opposite of that. So, and because the men aren't fulfilled, because they're not getting what they really want, they think, you know, if I'm with a different woman or, you know, something else, then I'll finally find it, because that's what they've been told. Only it's not there. It's empty.
Right. You have to come to that place in your experience where you realize no matter how many new things I go to, how far I go down this road, the results are going to keep being the same. That in the end, it was only satisfying for a moment, and then the satisfaction is gone. And what you're truly needing, you're not going to find it there.
Right. And that's why I love programs like Celebrate Recovery, where they address, this is for churches, where they address sex addiction in groups with men. And when men talk about the emptiness and the other men, you resonate with that, this is how we heal the men. Because human trafficking, obviously, like any business, has three sides. There's, you know, buyer, seller, and middleman. And the middleman's the trafficker. And we can take care of the victims, you know, and heal them and like that, but it's going to be never ending until we heal the men. So,
Yes.
and I just did a interview with Patrick Erlandson with his work and his effort to heal men with FatherCon and the other things he's doing. So do look for that interview.
Nice.
So, Marlene, if a group wanted to do a similar ministry, how do you suggest they start?
Okay, so first of all, you got to start with prayer, like anything else, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's basic, but
yes,
you can't miss that, because it's in prayer that you want the Holy Spirit to lead you. God is not calling everybody to lead a sex ministry, just like God's not calling everybody to any one specific ministry. We have to go where the Holy Spirit is leading us. That's number one. And if God's leading you in that way, it's through prayer that God's going to shape your heart, because you got to be equipped and prepared in your heart to serve in a sex ministry. You have to be prepared with knowledge. So I think preparing your heart comes a lot from, especially if you haven't been in the industry before, read women's stories, hear their stories.
Yes.
Survivors sharing their stories is what's going to connect your heart to what they're going through and give you God's perspective of how to love them and meet them where they're at. And so that, because you can have good intentions and you genuinely have love, but you go in and you could actually not be really showing them love in a way that they can receive it, or they might actually be offended by it because you're not loving them the right way. So and that comes down to the next thing of just equipping yourself. So whether that be becoming a certified, sex trafficking advocate, which I did mine with Open Door. They're not a Christian ministry, but it was free. And so there are organizations out there that you can get a really good foundation with statistics and understanding the real problems that are part of the sex industry. But you can also do it by just joining a ministry that's already out there.
Yes.
And let them teach you. So I have ladies that come into Pearls and, some of them, they've never been in the industry. And so you have to teach them, like, this is how we do ministry. This is our heart. This is where we're coming from.
Right.
So,
and this is the world that you're going to be walking into.
Right. To make sure they're prepared for it too, because your first time going into a strip club, if you've never been in one and you love the Lord, it's going to be quite the experience. Because a lot of us, it's like you only know what you see on TV.
Yes.
And TV glamorizes it.
Yes.
And honestly, I think there's only been one time I walked into a club and I was like, wow, this feels like a movie. Like dollar bills flying everywhere, and it was just such a yucky feeling. Like I was like, let's bless these ladies and let's get out. Like I don't want to be here. But most of the time, it's not glamorized. It's very it's a very different feeling walking in than what TV portrays it as.
Yes, over 90% of women in the commercial sex industry want to get out. So, and the media oftentimes shows them into it and loving it. Mm-hmm. And Marlene mentioned a church ministry. At this channel is a 3-part series to help anyone who's looking to do a church ministry to fight human trafficking. Just beginning with the video, how to create a dynamic anti-human trafficking ministry. So, like that. So is there anything else you wanted to add or share before we complete today?
Yeah, I mean, actually one thing I wanted to share earlier is one time we were in the club and we were talking with one of the dancers, and she was sharing about how, I'm going to assume a church group or organization, whatever, they were out front, their strip club. And then when they were coming into work, they were being told, like, basically that they're a slut and they're going to hell and all these things. And my heart just broke, because even if they believe they were doing right, and because Jesus talks about hell, there's nothing wrong with talking about hell, and it's important we cover the truth about things, but that's not what Jesus did.
No.
Jesus didn't go to women who were hurting in these sinful lifestyles or relationships and just condemn them to hell. He was loving them where they were at. He was offering himself to restore them and heal them. We have to be conduits of that as the church. So it's so important. I can't stress, like, you can equip yourself all you want with knowledge and understanding, but having God's heart is the most important.
Yes.
If you can't do it with God's love, get out.
Right. No,
nicely, but get out.
No, there's many things you could do. You could do a drive for a nonprofit. You don't have to necessarily interact with survivors of sex trafficking. However, if you do feel called to do that, I did an interview with Run to Rescue. They train churches to host survivors in their home, to invite them into the ministries at their church, because what we know, very sad, is these nonprofits are working very, very hard to rehabilitate these former victims, and yet half of them return to the life.
Yes.
Because they just don't feel they can make it. They have no community to be part of.
They need that support.
Yes, so they need to come into a community. And the faith community is a loving, supportive community that helps them continue to heal, where a church can help them get a sitter for their kids. They can invite them into their singles group. They can invite them into any healing ministry. And that has made the difference. So if you do feel called as a church to want to support former victims of sex trafficking, this channel has lots of resources. But as Marlene said, and I hear this over and over again from people who do similar work as her, is that very often the church has hurt these victims and alienated them from wanting to be part of a church. They're afraid they're going to walk in and be judged. And we don't want to do that, because they need God.
Yeah.
They have come from a very dark place and they really need God. So we want, as Marlene said, to be welcoming. I loved everything you shared. You so demonstrate God's heart in working with people that society has condemned. And it was just beautiful, everything you shared.
Well, one of the visions that God gave me through being in this ministry is he gave me this vision of actually heaven and women who have come from the industry dancing before the Lord.
Oh, I love that.
It was so beautiful because these women were filled with so much joy, with so much peace and wholeness, and they were dancing, and it was pure, and it was beautiful. And so when people, like, a lot of times people ask me, like, oh, so is your goal is to get the women out of the club, right? Because we're all here to fight against human trafficking and to help women heal that are coming out of the industry. And I'm like, no, actually, that's not my goal. My goal is to bring them Jesus. Because if all I do is get them out of the club, which, by the way, I don't have the power to do in and of myself.
Yes.
I can be a conduit and a resource and a necessary one to help get out. But I don't have that power, nor does anybody else.
Yes.
But Jesus gets a hold of their heart. That's when the transformation can happen. That's when, if they're perceiving what they're doing, it's like, it's not wrong, it's just dancing. Like, God's going to show them, like, hey, what you're doing isn't healthy for you, and it's not healthy for the men that you're dancing for, and I have something better for you. God loves you so much. He has something better for you. He's going to be the one to minister to that, to their heart. So he's going to be the one who's going to put in their heart, they need to get out, not me. So they already feel enough guilt sometimes, or they feel enough shame. That last thing they need is the church coming in and being like, well, you need to be out of this lifestyle. You need to be doing this. Like, yeah, okay, that's true.
Yes.
But that's not helpful.
Yes. And sometimes it's really a struggle for these sex trafficking victims to even believe in a God. Because if there is a God, how could he have allowed them to
have gone through what they've gone through
and be exploited and like that? And we really need to have compassion for that and trust that God will bring them to him and honor that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. And if God's not calling you to be in a sex ministry, like, the majority won't feel called. That doesn't mean you can't be a part of a prayer group.
Yes.
Girls, we have a prayer group where we post our prayer requests online. And I'm sure most ministries do have one. So if you find a ministry that's in your area, and start praying for them, start praying for the women, start praying for the men who are, exploiting these women. And also, if you're a parent, you have a huge responsibility as a parent to stop sex trafficking. You educate yourself on how pimps are coming after your kids in this culture. You got to be the authority to teach your kids about what God says about sex and what's healthy and what's not. And from an early age, unfortunately, we live in a day and age where we can't wait for them to hit puberty, because it really is too late. You can't wait till puberty to talk to your kids. You got to talk to them in age appropriate ways all the way up, preparing them. There is no one and done birds and bees talk that's awkward and nobody enjoys. It should just be a part of your teaching lifestyle as a parent. And as you see those teaching moments, and then also being intentional to talk about those things. So
Yes.
like with my stepson, I taught him about pornography at 7 years old. My husband and I both. And that was so important to me. He didn't understand what sex was at that time, but he understood the gist of pornography.
Yes.
And that's not
Yes.
okay to look at. And if he finds it, what does he do? So equipping yourself as a parent is so important because it's our kids that are our future, as you know,
Yes.
the cliche goes.
Yes. Yes, very good. And in our parent training that's also at this channel, one of the things we talk about, and you can talk to children who are 7 years old about porn. There's this great book called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures.
Yes, I had that one.
Yes.
I use that when
Yes.
we do internet safety training.
Yes.
And talk about pornography addictions.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Yes. There are tons of tools for parents, so you don't need to be intimidated. And
Right. You can always get a children's book
Yes.
that helps lead you through the subject
Yes.
and talking about those things. So it's just not this, how do I even start talking to my kid
Right.
about this without it being weird?
Right. And I know you do a lot, also do parent trainings as,
Yes.
as on the prevention side. You're doing
Yes.
both. This is
Yeah,
that.
because
Right.
it's not like, you know, we're getting phone calls left and right from the strip clubs of women who are wanting help. I wish that was the case, but it's not. So, I mean, strip club ministry is really, it's a seed planting ministry. It's a watering the seed ministry. It's a ministry, if you need a lot of fruit to be encouraged, it's not the ministry for you. Because honestly, a lot of these women, they may not come to the Lord till much later in life.
Yes.
And you'll never know.
Yes.
So one day you're before God and in heaven, and you're like, oh wow, I planted those seeds and I watered those seeds, but I never saw what the outcome was. So I was like, well, God, since the phone's not ringing off the hook, you know, what can we do? And the teacher in me is like, we got to teach about this.
Yes.
I'm very passionate about
Yes.
truth, and let's expose the lies of the sex industry, and let's help parents and let's help youth to understand. So they're not just, because youth, if they're not trained and they're not taught, they really are just victims waiting to get ensnared by pornography and other types of, you know, the industry.
Exploitation, right, exactly. So Marlene, thank you so much for being here today. I mean, what you shared was just beautiful and enlivening, and I want to encourage anyone who saw this today, who feels called to this ministry, to definitely keep pursuing it
Yes.
and to contact Pearls. Their website address is here on this video if you'd like more information about what they do.